Tom Keller woke up at 6 a.m. in his quiet suburban home in Seattle, his temples throbbing like someone had driven nails into his skull. At 34, he was no stranger to migraines, but this one hit like a freight train. He was supposed to be halfway to downtown by now, stuck in morning traffic, mentally rehearsing a pitch for a new client at the marketing firm where he'd worked for 7 years. Tom was that guy, always early, always prepared. He'd pressed his shirt the night before, charged his earbuds, and set 2 alarms just in case. But as he squinted against the pale light sneaking through the bedroom blinds, he knew there was no way he'd make it through the day. He fumbled for his phone on the nightstand, sent a quick email to his boss, and rescheduled the client meeting for Friday. Then he texted his wife, Amy, migraine. Working from home today. No reply. She was probably still asleep or out for her morning run along the trails near their neighborhood. Amy, a 32-year-old graphic designer at a tech startup, was a creature of habit, up at dawn, back by 7:30, always with a smoothie in hand. Tom dragged himself out of bed, popped a couple of ibuprofen, and ordered a breakfast burrito from the diner down the street. By 8:30, he was feeling human enough to drive back home after picking up his food. Their neighborhood in West Seattle was the kind of place people moved to for the vibe. Leafy streets, craftsman bungalows, and neighbors who waved even if they didn't know your name. It was the kind of place where baristas knew your coffee order, and the local brewery had a food truck every Friday. So when Tom turned onto their street and spotted a sleek gray pickup truck parked a few houses down, it stood out like a smudge on a clean window. The truck had Oregon plates, not unheard of this close to the state line, but something about it felt off. It was too clean, too new, with tinted windows that swallowed the morning light. Tom slowed his car without meaning to, his eyes lingering on the truck as he pulled into their driveway. He cut the engine and sat for a moment, watching the rearview mirror. Nothing moved. No one stepped out. Maybe it was just a visitor, he told himself, a friend of the Wilsons across the street, or someone dropping off a package. But his gut, that quiet voice he'd learned to trust over the years, whispered that something wasn't right. Tom grabbed his laptop bag and headed to the front door, his keys jingling in his hand. The door was unlocked. That was the second thing that made his stomach twist. Amy always locked the door, even when she was home, especially when she was home alone. She'd grown up in a rougher part of Tacoma and had a thing about security, deadbolt, chain, the works. Tom pushed the door open slowly, like he was stepping into a stranger's house. The air inside was warm, heavy with the scent of Amy's lavender candle, the one she only lit for guests or date nights. The living room was quiet, but he heard voices, low, soft, coming from the kitchen. His sneakers squeaked faintly on the hardwood as he moved forward, not because he was trying to sneak, but because his body seemed to know something his brain hadn't caught up to yet. The kitchen island came into view, and there she was, Amy, sitting on a bar stool, a glass of white wine in her hand. Across from her, leaning casually against the counter, was a man Tom had never seen before. He looked about 30, with a short beard and dark hair, wearing a navy flannel shirt with the sleeves rolled up, like he'd just walked out of a craft brewery ad. His posture was relaxed, one hand resting on the counter, the other holding a matching wine glass. Amy was laughing, her head tilted slightly, her auburn hair catching the sunlight streaming through the window. They weren't touching, but they were close, too close for strangers. The way they leaned toward each other felt intimate, like they were sharing a secret the rest of the world wasn't allowed to hear. Tom stepped into the kitchen, and Amy's head snapped up. Her laugh cut off mid-breath, and for a split second, her eyes widened before she plastered on a smile. "Oh, Tom," she said, her voice a pitch too high, like she'd been caught cheating on a test. "You're home early. I thought you had that big meeting downtown." "Migraine," Tom said, his voice flat. His eyes flicked to the man, who hadn't moved, just stood there with a calm, almost amused expression. Amy set her glass down, a little too quickly. "This is Lucas," she said, gesturing between them. "He's a friend of Caitlin's from my book club. You know Caitlin, right? Lucas is planning to propose, and I'm helping him brainstorm some ideas. Something romantic, you know." Lucas gave a slow nod, his lips curling into a half-smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Nice to meet you, man," he said, extending a hand. His voice was low, confident, like he was used to charming his way through awkward moments. Tom shook his hand, more out of reflex than desire, and felt a jolt of unease at how steady Lucas's grip was. Amy jumped in before Tom could say anything, her words tumbling out too fast. He was thinking maybe a surprise at the waterfront, like hiding the ring in a picnic basket or something. Isn't that sweet? Tom forced a smile, his jaw tight. Yeah. Thoughtful. He didn't sit down, didn't move closer. He just stood there, gripping the strap of his laptop bag, his mind racing. Amy's explanation made sense on paper. Her book club was a big part of her social life, and Caitlin was one of her closer friends. But something about the scene didn't add up. Why was Lucas here, in their kitchen, drinking wine at 10 a.m.? Why was Amy's laugh so bright, her posture so relaxed, when she hadn't laughed like that with Tom in months? And that look in her eyes when she'd seen him, a flicker of panic, gone as quickly as it came. Lucas didn't stay long. He finished his wine, made some vague comment about needing to run errands, and headed for the door. Amy walked him out, her voice carrying back to the kitchen, bright and chatty. Tom stood frozen, staring at the 2 empty wine glasses on the counter. When Amy returned, she gave him a quick kiss on the cheek, her lips cool against his skin. Sorry if that was weird, she said, already rinsing the glasses. Lucas just really wanted a woman's perspective on the proposal. Caitlin's tough to surprise. Tom nodded, his throat tight. Yeah, no big deal. But as she turned away, humming to herself, he couldn't shake the feeling that he'd just walked in on something he wasn't supposed to see. The truck with Oregon plates was gone when he glanced out the window, but the unease it left behind lingered like a shadow. Something was wrong. He didn't have proof, not yet, but Tom had always trusted his instincts. And right now, they were screaming that his life, his marriage, his home, wasn't as solid as he'd thought. The days after Tom walked in on Amy and Lucas felt like walking through fog. Everything looked familiar, but nothing felt clear. He went through the motions, morning coffee at the kitchen island, Zoom calls in his home office, takeout dinners with Amy on the couch. But the memory of that morning gnawed at him. Amy's forced smile, the wine glasses at 10 a.m., the gray pickup with Oregon plates, it all looped in his mind like a song he couldn't skip. He wanted to ask her about Lucas, to demand details, but every time he opened his mouth, the word stuck. What if he was wrong? What if he was just paranoid, turning a harmless moment into a crisis? Tom had always prided himself on being rational, but doubt was a relentless houseguest. Amy didn't bring up Lucas again, and that silence only made things worse. She was her usual self on the surface, chatty about her latest design project, scrolling through Instagram while they watched Netflix, kissing him goodnight with a quick peck. But Tom started noticing things he hadn't before, small shifts that felt like pebbles rolling down a hill before an avalanche. Her phone, once left carelessly on the counter, now lived face down, always on silent. When it buzzed, she'd glance at it, then slide it into her pocket with a casualness that felt rehearsed. She started going to the gym more 4, sometimes 5 times a week, occasionally twice in one day. Just trying to stay consistent, she'd say with a shrug, but her gym bag always came back pristine. No sweat stains, no crumpled water bottle. One evening, as Amy chopped vegetables for tacos, Tom leaned in to kiss her neck, a playful gesture they'd done 1,000 times. She flinched, stepping sideways to grab a spatula, muttering something about not burning the onions. Her laugh was tight, like a string pulled too taut. Tom played it off, joking about her chef focus, but the rejection stung. He couldn't remember the last time she'd leaned into his touch without hesitation. The space between them wasn't a canyon yet, but it was growing, inch by quiet inch. Tom tried to rationalize it. Relationships had rhythms, didn't they? Peaks and valleys, like his mom used to say. Amy had been stressed at work. Her startup was pushing for a big product launch, and she'd been pulling late nights. Maybe she was just distracted. Maybe he was reading too much into it. But then there were the inconsistencies, little cracks in her stories that he couldn't ignore. Last Tuesday, she'd said she was grabbing coffee with Sarah, a coworker, at a cafe near Pike Place Market. A few days later, over breakfast, she mentioned a happy hour with Jenna, another colleague, at the exact same time and day. Wait, Tom said, keeping his tone light, weren't you with Sarah that day? Amy didn't miss a beat. Oh, yeah, I meant Jenna. Sarah was the week before. Her smile was flawless, but her eyes darted away, just for a second. That night, alone in his office, Tom did something he never thought he'd do. He started writing it down. In the Notes app on his phone, he typed, Tuesday, for PM, said coffee with Sarah, later said happy hour with Jenna. It felt absurd, like he was playing detective in his own marriage, but the act of documenting grounded him. It wasn't just the coffee mix-up. There was the time she said she was at a team dinner but posted a vague Instagram story of a cocktail glass with no location tag. Or the way her gym clothes showed up in the laundry, freshly washed, when he hadn't seen her wear them. He wasn't building a case, not yet. He was trying to prove to himself he wasn't crazy. The name Lucas kept surfacing unbidden, like a splinter under his skin. Tom had never heard of him before that morning, not in any of Amy's book club stories, not in passing. If Caitlin was such a close friend, wouldn't her boyfriend have come up at some point? He opened Instagram one night while Amy was in the shower, scrolling through Caitlin's profile. No trace of Lucas, no couple selfies, no tagged photos, just solo shots at farmers markets and yoga retreats. He searched Lucas's name online, but with no last name, it was a dead end. The internet gave him nothing but a ghost. The paranoia started creeping into places it didn't belong. At work, Tom found himself distracted, replaying Amy's laugh with Lucas, the way her hand had rested so easily on the counter near his. He'd catch himself staring at her phone when she left it on the table, tempted to check it. He didn't. Some part of him still wanted to trust her, to believe there was an innocent explanation. But the doubts were piling up, heavy and unyielding. One night, as they brushed their teeth side by side, Tom tried to test the waters. "How's Caitlin doing?" he asked casually, watching her reflection in the mirror. "Still helping her boyfriend with that proposal?" Amy didn't flinch. She spat toothpaste into the sink and rinsed her brush. "Oh, Lucas? Yeah, he's got it figured out, I think. Something about a beach picnic next month." Her voice was smooth, effortless, like she'd rehearsed it. Tom nodded, his chest tightening. "Sounds nice," he said, but his mind was screaming. Why does it feel like a lie? The breaking point came a week later. Amy said she was heading to a hot yoga class, grabbing her gym bag and a water bottle. Tom noticed she'd forgotten her yoga mat, still rolled up in the corner of the living room. "Hey, you need this?" he called as she reached the door. She froze for a split second, then laughed. "Oh, they have spares at the studio. I'm good." She was gone before he could say anything else. Tom stood there, staring at the mat, his pulse thudding in his ears. He didn't know what was happening, but he knew it wasn't yoga. The woman he'd married, the one who used to leave him silly post-it notes on the fridge, was slipping away, or maybe she'd already left, and he was just now noticing. That night he called Nathan, his best friend since their college days at the University of Washington. Nathan was the kind of guy who'd show up with a six-pack and no judgment, the one who'd called Tom out when he was being a jerk but never made him feel small. They hadn't talked much lately, life got in the way, but Tom needed someone who'd listen without sugarcoating. "I think something's up with Amy," he said, his voice low, like saying it out loud made it real. Nathan didn't interrupt, just let Tom spill it all. The truck, Lucas, the wine, the gym trips, the stories that didn't add up. When he finished, Nathan's voice was steady. "You're not losing it, man. If your gut's telling you something's off, it probably is. But don't do anything rash. Figure out what you need to know, and do it smart." Tom hung up, his hands trembling. He didn't want to be right, but he couldn't keep pretending everything was fine. Tom couldn't sleep. The ceiling of their Seattle bedroom stared back at him, its shadow shifting with every passing car outside. Amy's yoga mat, still untouched in the living room corner, haunted his thoughts. Her laugh with Lucas, the way her stories never quite lined up, the phone always face down. It was all adding up to something he didn't want to name. He'd spent weeks trying to convince himself he was overreacting, that marriages had rough patches, that Amy was just stressed. But Nathan's words echoed in his head. If your gut's telling you something's off, it probably is. By 2 a.m., Tom was done pretending. He slipped out of bed, careful not to wake Amy, who slept with her back to him, her breathing steady. Downstairs, he poured a glass of water and sat at the kitchen island, his phone glowing in the dark. The Notes app was now a diary of doubts. Tuesday, coffee with Sarah, later said Jenna. Thursday, team dinner, but cocktail story on IG. Sunday, gym twice, bag clean. Each entry felt like a betrayal, not just of Amy, but of the life they'd built. They'd been married 5 years, together for 8. They'd planned a future, kids, a cabin near Mount Rainier, maybe a dog. How had it come to this? The next morning, Amy left for work early, her gym bag slung over her shoulder. "Big deadline today," she said, kissing Tom's cheek before darting out. He noticed her perfumed floral, sharp, not her usual post-gym scent. It was a small thing, but it landed like a punch. After she left, Tom opened her laptop, left unlocked on the dining table. He wasn't proud of it, but he needed answers. The browser history showed nothing unusual: work emails, Pinterest boards for home decor, but one tab caught his eye, a confirmation email for a hotel in Portland, booked for next weekend. Amy had told him she was attending a team-building retreat for her startup. The email was for a single room, not a group rate, at a boutique hotel with a rooftop bar. His stomach churned. Tom closed the laptop, his hands shaking. He didn't want to jump to conclusions, but the pieces were falling into place. The hotel, the gym trips, Lucas's smug smile, they weren't random. He needed more than a hunch, though. Nathan's advice rang clear. Do it smart. Tom knew Amy backed up her phone to their shared iCloud account. It was a long shot, but maybe there was something she hadn't deleted. He logged into the iCloud website from his laptop, his heart pounding like he was breaking into a bank. The messages folder loaded, and there it was, a thread she'd deleted from her phone but not from the cloud. The name at the top wasn't Lucas. It was Justin. The conversation was short but damning. Can't wait for Portland. Same spot as last time? Followed by a winking emoji. Amy's reply. You know it. I'll bring the red dress. There were older messages too, from weeks ago, mentioning drinks at the pier and that night in Tacoma. Tom scrolled, his breath shallow, until he found another thread, this one with Eric. Similar vibe, flirty, suggestive, with a photo of Amy in a bar, her smile bright, her hand on a man's arm. Not Lucas, not Justin. Someone else. The timestamps overlapped with moments she'd claimed to be at work or with friends. This wasn't one mistake. It was a pattern. Tom leaned back, the kitchen spinning. His wife wasn't just lying, she was living a double life. The woman who'd cried with him at his dad's funeral, who danced with him in their living room to old Fleetwood Mac records, was a stranger. He felt sick, not just from betrayal but from the realization that he'd ignored the signs for months. The gym bag, the phone, the dodged hugs, it had all been there, screaming at him to wake up. He saved screenshots of the messages, emailed them to himself, and logged out. He wasn't sure what he'd do with them, but he needed proof, something to anchor him when the doubts crept back. At work, Tom was a ghost. His team noticed he missed a deadline, zoned out in a meeting, but he brushed it off as stress. The truth was, he was replaying every moment with Amy, searching for the point where things had fractured. Had it started with Lucas? Before him? He tried confronting her in his head, imagining her reaction. Would she cry? Deny it? Blame him? The thought of asking, "Are you cheating?" terrified him, not because he feared the answer, but because it would make the unraveling real. Once the words were out, there'd be no going back. That night, Amy came home late, her hair damp like she'd showered at the gym. Crazy day, she said, tossing her bag by the door. The client keeps changing the brief. Tom nodded, stirring pasta on the stove. He wanted to scream, to shove the screenshots in her face, but he held back. Instead, he asked, "How's the retreat planning going?" "Portland, right?" Her fork paused midair, just for a second. "Oh, yeah," she said, recovering. "It's just a quick thing. Team stuff." She changed the subject, rambling about a new coffee shop in Fremont. Tom watched her, marveling at how easily the lies rolled off her tongue. He called Nathan again, this time from his car, parked in a grocery store lot to avoid being overheard. "It's not just one guy," Tom said, his voice hoarse. "There are others. Messages, plans, hotels. She's been doing this for months." Nathan didn't sugarcoat it. "That's brutal, man. I'm sorry. But you've got proof now. What's your next move?" Tom gripped the steering wheel, the leather creaking under his hands. "I don't know. I want to confront her, but I'm not ready for it to end. Not like this." Nathan's voice softened. "It already ended, Tom. She made that choice. Now you decide what you're worth." Those words stuck with Tom as he drove home, the Seattle skyline blurring through the rain. He didn't want to be the guy who snooped, who doubted, who fell apart. But he also didn't want to be the fool who looked the other way. Amy was asleep when he got back, her phone charging on her nightstand, screen dark. He stood in the doorway, watching her, wondering who she was when he wasn't looking. The truth was out there now, sharp and undeniable, but it didn't feel like freedom. It felt like a weight, pressing down until he could barely breathe. He knew he couldn't stay silent much longer. The question wasn't if he'd confront her, it was when. Tom sat in his car outside their Seattle home, the engine off, the rain tapping a steady rhythm on the windshield. The screenshots of Amy's messages, Justin, Eric, plans for Portland, burned in his mind like a brand. For days, he'd carried the truth like a weight, unsure how to wield it. Part of him wanted to scream, to shatter the fragile pretense of their marriage. Another part wanted to walk away, to spare himself the pain of hearing her excuses. But Nathan's words kept him grounded. You decide what you're worth. Tom wasn't ready to lose himself to anger or despair. He needed closure, and that meant facing her. He texted Amy that morning, his fingers trembling as he typed, Asterisk, can we talk tonight? I'm not mad, just need to understand some things. Asterisk, her reply came within minutes, bright and eager. Asterisk, of course, Tom. I'll make coffee. Glad you want to talk. Asterisk, the warmth in her words felt like a trap, but Tom knew her well enough to play along. He spent the day at work in a daze, his marketing presentations a blur of charts and buzzwords. His coworkers shot him concerned looks, but he waved them off. By 5 p.m., he was driving home, rehearsing what he'd say, his heart a drumbeat in his chest. When he walked through the front door, the house smelled of fresh coffee and that lavender candle Amy lit for guests. The living room was spotless, cushions fluffed, coasters aligned, like she'd staged a scene from a lifestyle blog. Amy stood in the kitchen, wearing a soft gray sweater and jeans, her auburn hair pulled into a loose bun. She looked like the woman he'd married, the one who'd laughed at his bad puns and planned camping trips to the Olympic Peninsula. But her eyes, darting nervously as she handed him a mug, betrayed her. Hey, she said, her voice soft, practiced. I'm really glad you're here. I've been thinking about us too. She sat on the edge of the couch, her hands clasped like she was bracing for impact. Tom set the coffee down untouched, his throat tight. He didn't want to yell or accuse. He wanted the truth, raw and unfiltered, no matter how much it hurt. I'm not here to fight, he said, his voice steady despite the storm inside. I just need you to be honest. No stories, no deflections. Can you do that? Amy nodded quickly, her fingers twisting the hem of her sweater. Of course, she said. I want to fix this, Tom. Whatever's been off, we can work through it. He let the silence stretch, heavy and deliberate. Then he leaned forward, his eyes locked on hers. I need your phone. Her face didn't change, but her shoulders stiffened, a micro-movement he'd have missed a month ago. Why? She asked, her tone light, almost playful. Just to check something, Tom said. A message I think I sent you a while back. Might have deleted it by accident. It was a lie, and he hated how easily it came out, but he needed her to trust him for this to work. Amy hesitated, then reached for her phone on the coffee table. She unlocked it and handed it over, her smile tight. Tom took it, his pulse roaring in his ears. He didn't open the Messages app, she deleted anything incriminating there. Instead, he navigated to the iCloud settings, opened the synced messages folder, and pulled up the threads he'd found. Justin's winking emoji, Eric's bar photo, the Portland hotel plans. He turned the phone so she could see, the screen glowing like an accusation. Amy's face drained of color. Her mouth opened, then closed, like a fish gasping for air. Tom, she started, but he cut her off, his voice low but firm. How long, Amy? How many? Don't lie to me now. She pressed her hands to her face, her breath hitching. For a moment, he thought she'd deny it, spin another story about book clubs or retreats. But the evidence was undeniable, and she knew it. 6 months, she whispered, her voice breaking. Maybe a bit more. I didn't mean for it to happen, Tom. I was lost. Work was crushing me, and I felt so alone, even with you here. Her eyes welled up, tears spilling over, but Tom felt nothing. No pity, no rage, just a hollow ache where love used to be. 6 months, he repeated, the words tasting bitter. You planned trips, deleted messages, looked me in the eye every day. That's not being lost. That's choosing to lie. Amy sobbed, her shoulders shaking. I didn't want to hurt you, she said. I kept trying to stop, to fix it, but it just spiraled. I love you, Tom. I swear I do. He shook his head, the words landing like ash. Love didn't hide hotel bookings or flirt with strangers. Love didn't build a secret life while he planned their future. Who's Lucas? He asked, his voice sharp now. Was he one of them, or just the first I caught? She flinched, wiping her tears. He's someone I met through work. It wasn't serious. None of them were. They were just distractions. The word hit Tom like a slap. Distractions. 8 years together, and he'd been reduced to background noise. He stood, setting her phone on the couch. You didn't make a mistake, Amy, he said. You made choices. Over and over again. She reached for his hand, but he stepped back. Please, Tom, she begged. We can go to therapy, start over. I'll do anything. Her voice cracked, desperate, but it was too late. Tom saw her clearly now, not as his wife, but as someone who'd rewritten their story without him. He walked to the bedroom, grabbed a duffel bag, and started packing. Shirts, jeans, his laptop charger, essentials, nothing sentimental. Amy followed, her sobs growing louder. Don't do this, she said. We can fix it. Please. He zipped the bag, his movements mechanical. You broke it, he said, turning to face her. Not me. He walked past her, down the stairs, and out the front door. The rain had stopped, leaving the air cool and sharp. Amy's voice followed him, pleading, but he didn't look back. He got in his car, tossed the bag in the back seat, and drove. The Seattle skyline faded in his rearview mirror, and for the first time in months, he felt like he could breathe, even if every breath hurt. Tom woke up on Nathan's couch in a small Capitol Hill apartment, the Seattle skyline a gray smudge through the window. His neck ached from the lumpy cushions, and his mouth tasted like stale coffee, but for the first time in months, his mind felt clear. The confrontation with Amy had gutted him, but it had also freed him. Her tearful excuses, her claim that her betrayals were distractions, echoed in his head. 6 months of lies, multiple men, a secret life. He'd seen the truth on her phone, and it had shattered the illusion of their marriage. Now, sitting in Nathan's cluttered living room, Tom faced a new question. What next? Nathan, already in the kitchen flipping pancakes, didn't push for details. He just slid a plate across the counter and said, Eat. Then we figure out your game plan. Tom nodded, grateful for his friend's steady presence. Nathan had been his rock since their college days, the guy who dragged him to intramural soccer games and called him out when he was spiraling. Over breakfast, Tom laid it out. I can't go back to that house. Not after what I saw. But I don't know how to move forward without losing everything. Nathan leaned back, sipping his coffee. You're not losing, man. You're reclaiming. She made her choices. Now you make yours. The first step was practical. Tom needed a place to stay. Nathan offered his couch for as long as needed, but Tom knew he couldn't rebuild his life from a friend's living room. He checked into a budget hotel near Lake Union, using savings he'd set aside for a vacation that now felt like a distant dream. Alone in the sterile room, he opened his laptop and reviewed the screenshots he'd saved Amy's messages with Justin, Eric, the Portland hotel booking. The evidence was a lifeline, proof he wasn't imagining the betrayal. But it was also a weapon, and he wasn't sure how to use it without turning bitter. A week later, Amy texted him, Tom, I'm so sorry. Can we talk? I messed up, but I want to make it right. He stared at the message, his thumb hovering over the reply button. Part of him wanted to hear her out, to see if there was anything left to salvage. But then he remembered her voice, casual and cruel, calling her affairs distractions. He didn't respond. The next day, another message came, this one sharper. If you shut me out, I'll tell everyone you spied on my phone. I have proof you went through my stuff. The threat hit like a slap, but Tom didn't flinch. He forwarded the message to his email, another piece of evidence. Amy wasn't just remorseful, she was desperate to control the narrative. Tom knew he needed help. He contacted a divorce attorney recommended by a coworker, a no-nonsense woman named Carla who specialized in high-conflict cases. In her downtown office, Tom laid out everything, the messages, the hotel bookings, Amy's threat. Carla listened, her pen tapping the desk. You've got a strong case, she said. Washington's a no-fault state, so infidelity doesn't directly affect asset division, but her attempt to blackmail you could sway things. Let's use the evidence to protect your interests, house, savings, the works. Tom nodded, relief mixing with dread. He didn't want to fight dirty, but he wasn't going to let Amy rewrite their story. The legal process was slow but methodical. Carla filed for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences. The screenshots and Amy's threatening text strengthened Tom's position, especially when it came to their shared assets. The house, a craftsman bungalow they bought 3 years ago, was their biggest joint investment. Amy fought to keep it, claiming emotional attachment, but Carla's team proved she'd used marital funds for her secret trips, tipping the scales. The court awarded Tom the house, which he promptly listed for sale. He didn't want to live in a place stained by lies. With the divorce underway, Tom made a bigger decision. He needed a fresh start. Seattle, with its rainy streets and memories of Amy, felt suffocating. He applied for a senior marketing role at a firm in Denver, a city he'd visited once and loved for its mountains and open skies. The interview process was grueling, but Tom's portfolio spoke for itself. 2 weeks later, he got the offer. He sold the house, paid off the mortgage, and used the remaining funds to cover his move. The day he signed the closing papers, he felt a weight lift, not joy, but freedom. In Denver, Tom rented a small apartment with a view of the Rockies. He bought a rescue dog, a scruffy mutt he named Rocky, who greeted him with slobbery enthusiasm every day. He started hiking on weekends, Betrayal's a quiet space to process the past. He even signed up for a photography class, something he'd always wanted to try but never had time for. The camera gave him a new way to see the world, one frame at a time, unclouded by deception. Amy tried contacting him once more, a long email full of apologies and pleas for forgiveness. Asterisk, I was in a dark place, Tom. I know I hurt you, but I've changed. Asterisk, he read it, then deleted it. She wasn't his responsibility anymore. He blocked her number and social media, not out of spite, but to protect his peace. The divorce finalized 3 months later, with Tom retaining most of their savings and no alimony obligations. Amy's threats never materialized. Carla's legal strategy had neutralized them. One evening, sitting on his apartment balcony with Rocky at his feet, Tom watched the sun dip behind the mountains. The air was crisp, the sky streaked with pink and gold. He thought about the man he'd been a year ago, blindsided by Amy's betrayal, doubting his own worth. That man was gone. In his place was someone stronger, not because he'd won a fight, but because he'd chosen himself. Amy had lost everything: her marriage, her home, her credibility. Tom's justice wasn't revenge. It was rebuilding a life rooted in truth. As Rocky nudged his hand for a scratch, Tom smiled. The road ahead was his, and for the first time, it felt wide open.